Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The rain didn't wash away the sins of the city. It only made the blood slicker against the pavement. Julian didn't need to see the black SUVs swarming his apartment complex to know his time had run out. The air itself had changed, heavy with the scent of ozone and a terrifying, predatory musk that made the fine hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He abandoned the suitcase, half-packed with newborn clothes and a burner phone, and bolted for the fire escape, his hand instinctively cradling the slight swell of his stomach. Thunder cracked, masking the sound of the front door splintering off its hinges, but nothing could mask the voice that drifted up the stairwell, low, baritone, and vibrating with a lethal sort of calm. "Run all you like, little bird." The voice echoed, wrapping around Julian's pounding heart like a vice. "But you are carrying my legacy. And no one steals from the Rossi family and lives to tell the tale." Part I. The Miracle and the Mistake. 3 months earlier, the world had been a quieter, grayer place. Julian Vane, a 26-year-old archivist with a penchant for silence and the smell of old paper, had made a decision. He was an omega in a world that often treated his dynamic as delicate, but Julian possessed a quiet spine of steel. He wanted a family. He didn't want a mate. He had seen how alphas consumed their partners, stripping away their identity until nothing remained but a subservient shell. He wanted a child, something of his own to love, to nurture, to protect. The Galaxy Fertility Clinic was pristine, white, and expensive. It was supposed to be the safest place in the city. Julian had selected a donor profile that was safe, an academic, beta, no history of genetic defects, mild temperament. He remembered the procedure clearly. The sterile chill of the room. The doctor's trembling hands, something Julian had dismissed as coffee jitters at the time. "Is everything all right, Dr. Eris?" Julian had asked, lying on the paper-covered table, staring at the ceiling tiles. "Fine. Everything is fine," the doctor had snapped, sweating despite the air conditioning. "Just a busy day. Protocol adjustments." Julian hadn't known then that 5 minutes prior, a frantic nurse had dropped a tray of vials during a security lockdown triggered by a rival gang's infiltration. He didn't know that in a panic to cover up the destruction of a high-value sample intended for a black market auction, the staff had swapped labels. He didn't know that the vial labeled Anonymous Beta 404 was actually genetic material harvested from Dante Rossi, the capo of the most ruthless syndicate on the East Coast, a man whose DNA was so potent, so aggressive, that it was rumored he had no natural heirs because his seed overwhelmed every surrogate. Until Julian. The pregnancy took immediately. The morning sickness was violent, replaced quickly by a strange, ravenous hunger and a sudden, heightened sensitivity to his surroundings. But it was the feeling that scared him. It wasn't just a heartbeat he felt on the ultrasound, it was a presence. A heavy, dark weight that seemed to stare back at him from the grainy black and white monitor. Then, the news broke. Dr. Eris was found dead. Not natural causes. He had been disassembled, piece by piece, in his office. The police called it a gang hit. Julian, clutching his stomach in his small apartment, felt a cold dread seep into his bones. 2 days later, he received a letter. No return address. Just a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored cardstock with a family crest embossed in black wax. A wolf devouring a serpent. Asterisk, I know what you have. I am coming. Asterisk. Part 2. The Dragon's Den. The fire escape was slick with rain. Julian slipped, his knee slamming into the metal grate, but he scrambled up, gasping. He was 3 stories up. The alleyway below was a dark maw. Going somewhere. The figure stepped out of the shadows on the roof, landing above him. Lightning flashed, illuminating a man who looked like he had been carved from marble and nightmares. Dante Rossi was tall, his shoulders broad enough to block out the city lights. He wore a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than Julian's entire life, unbuttoned at the collar to reveal a throat tattooed with intricate, geometric ink. But it was his eyes, amber, glowing faintly in the dark, that froze Julian in place. "Alpha. A prime alpha." "Stay back," Julian gasped, backing down a step. "I'll scream." Dante laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the sound of a glacier cracking. "Scream. Let the neighbors hear." Let them know who is claiming you. It will save me the trouble of marking the territory." He descended the stairs with a predator's grace, ignoring the rain soaking his expensive suit. "You have something of mine, Julian." "I went to a clinic," Julian shouted, the wind whipping his hair into his eyes. "I paid. It was legal. The sample was stolen." "Sabotage meant to leave me without an heir," Dante said, stopping 2 steps above Julian, boxing him in. The scent of him hit Julian like a physical blow: burnt sandalwood, rain, and gunmetal. It was overwhelming, intoxicating, and terrifying. Julian's knees buckled, his omega biology betraying him, recognizing the father of the child within him. "I didn't know," Julian whispered, clutching the railing. "Ignorance is not a defense," Dante murmured, reaching out. His hand, large and gloved in black leather, cupped Julian's jaw. The touch was possessive, not gentle. But nature is interesting. Dozens of carefully selected surrogates failed. And yet, a little archivist with ink stains on his fingers succeeds. Dante's thumb brushed Julian's lower lip. "You are coming with me." "No." Julian slapped the hand away. The sound echoed. Silence stretched, thick and dangerous. Dante's head tilted. He didn't look angry. He looked fascinated. "You have spirit. Good. My son will need a mother who isn't weak." "I am not a mother," Julian hissed. "I am a father. And this is my child." "Our child," Dante corrected, his voice dropping an octave, vibrating through Julian's chest. "And you will learn that in my world, what is mine stays mine." Before Julian could move, Dante lunged. It wasn't an attack, it was a capture. One arm swept around Julian's waist, lifting him off the metal grate as if he weighed nothing. Julian kicked, thrashing, but Dante held him tight against his chest, shielding Julian's stomach with his own body as he carried him up to the roof where a helicopter waited, its blades slicing through the storm. Part 3. Gilded Cage. The Rossi estate was a fortress disguised as a mansion, perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. Julian was installed in the East Wing, a suite of rooms larger than his entire apartment building. The windows were bulletproof, the doors locked from the outside, and the guards, hulking betas with earpieces, never spoke to him. For 3 weeks, Julian lived in luxurious captivity. He was fed gourmet meals tailored for his pregnancy, given vitamins, and examined by a private medical team that treated him like a precious, fragile vase. But he didn't see Dante. The isolation was a weapon. It gave Julian time to think, to worry, to fester. Was he just an incubator? Once the baby was born, would he be disposed of? The thought kept him awake at night, pacing the Persian rugs, his hands soothing the rapid flutter of life inside him. He decided he had to escape. Not for himself, but for the baby. He couldn't raise a child in a house built on blood. He studied the patterns. The guards changed shift at 6 a.m. The delivery trucks for the kitchens arrived at 6:15 a.m. There was a blind spot near the rose garden where the cameras didn't rotate fully. One morning, shrouded in coastal fog, Julian made his move. He feigned illness to distract the night nurse, stole a keycard, and slipped out the service entrance. The damp grass soaked his slippers as he ran toward the perimeter wall. He could see the delivery truck idling. If he could just climb into the back. The roses are lovely this time of year, aren't they? Julian froze. He was 10 feet from the truck. Dante was sitting on a stone bench beneath a weeping willow, legs crossed, a tablet in his hand. He didn't look up. He wore a cashmere sweater and casual trousers, looking deceivingly domestic, but the Beretta resting on the bench beside him told a different story. Julian stammered, his heart hammering against his ribs. "The gate code is changed daily," Dante said, finally looking up. His amber eyes were cold. "The truck driver is on my payroll, and the woods beyond the wall are filled with traps for intruders. Tell me, Julian, where did you plan to go? Back to your apartment? My enemies burned it down 2 hours after I took you." Julian paled. You burned my home." "I erased a vulnerability," Dante corrected, standing up. He walked over to Julian, who stood shivering in the fog. Dante took off his coat and draped it over Julian's shoulders. The warmth was instant, enveloping. "You are carrying the heir to the Rossi Empire. Do you think you can just live? Do you think you can take him to a park? To a public school? There are men who would peel your skin off just to get to him to hurt me. I didn't ask for this," Julian shouted, tears finally spilling over. I just wanted a baby. I didn't ask for the Mafia. I didn't ask for you. Dante's expression shifted. The mask of cold indifference cracked. He stepped closer, crowding Julian against the rough bark of a tree. And you think I asked for this? To have my lineage tied to a stranger? To have my enemies scenting blood? He leaned down, his nose brushing Julian's scent gland on his neck. Julian gasped, a jolt of electricity shooting down his spine. But fate is a cruel mistress, Dante whispered against his skin. You smell like rain and old paper. And God help me, it calms the beast inside. Dante pulled back, his eyes searching Julian's. You are not a prisoner because I hate you, Julian. You are a prisoner because if you leave this estate, you will be dead within the hour. And I. Dante hesitated, a muscle in his jaw twitching. I find that unacceptable. Because of the baby, Julian said bitterly. At first, Dante admitted. But you are growing on me. You fight. I like that. Part 4, Blood and Bond. The dynamic shifted after that morning in the garden. Julian was no longer confined to his room. He was allowed to roam the house, though always with a guard. He began to see Dante more often. Dinner became a ritual. They sat at a long mahogany table, candles flickering between them. They argued. They debated philosophy, music, history. Julian refused to be cowed. He challenged Dante's worldview, his morality. And Dante, surprisingly, engaged him. The alpha seemed starved for intellectual challenge, bored by the sycophants who usually surrounded him. You justify violence as necessary for order, Julian argued one evening over risotto. But order built on fear is brittle. Civilization is a thin veneer over savagery, Dante countered, swirling his red wine. I merely acknowledge the wolf at the door. You pretend it isn't there. I don't pretend, Julian said, resting his hand on his stomach, which was undeniably rounder now. I just choose to build walls to keep it out, rather than inviting it in for dinner. Dante's eyes dropped to Julian's hand. The gaze was heavy, heated. Sometimes the wolf is already inside the walls, Julian. The fragility of their truce shattered 2 weeks later. Julian was in the library, restoring a damaged first edition Dante had acquired for him when the alarms blared. A high-pitched, wailing siren that signaled a breach. Gunfire erupted in the hallway. Julian dropped the book. The door burst open. It wasn't Dante. It was a man Julian didn't know, scarred face, wild eyes, holding a submachine gun. A rival faction had breached the perimeter. So this is the golden goose, the man sneered, raising the weapon. Julian scrambled backward, overturning a heavy oak table for cover. He curled into a ball, shielding his stomach, squeezing his eyes shut, waiting for the end. Bang! It wasn't the spray of a machine gun. It was a single, thunderous shot. Silence followed. Then, the heavy thud of a body hitting the floor. Julian. The voice was ragged. Julian peeked over the table. Dante stood in the doorway. He was a mess, his white shirt stained red, a shallow knife wound across his cheek, his gun smoking in his hand. But his eyes were blazing with a terrifying, feral light. He didn't walk. He stalked across the room. He kicked the dead intruder's weapon away and hauled Julian up from behind the table. Are you hurt? Dante demanded, his hands checking Julian frantically, patting down his arms, his back, his legs. Did he touch you? No. I'm fine, Julian stammered, trembling. He looked at the blood on Dante's shirt. You're bleeding. It's not mine, Dante said dismissively, though he winced when he moved his left arm. We have to move. The West Wing is compromised. He pulled Julian close, burying his face in Julian's neck, inhaling deeply. I thought. Dante's voice cracked. When I heard they were near the library. I have never known fear, Julian. Not until 10 minutes ago. Julian froze. The alpha, the monster of the city, was shaking. Not from pain, but from adrenaline. From terror of loss. Without thinking, Julian reached up and pressed his hand against the wound on Dante's cheek. The blood was hot. We're okay. We're both okay. Dante leaned into the touch, his eyes closing for a brief second. I will burn this city to the ground for this, he vowed, his voice a low growl. I will kill everyone who even thought about touching you. Dante, Julian said softly. It was the first time he had used the alpha's first name without malice. Let's just survive first. Part V, the choice. The aftermath of the attack changed everything. The estate was locked down, the security tripled. But the walls between Julian and Dante had crumbled. Dante allowed himself to be vulnerable only within the sanctuary of Julian's room. Julian cleaned Dante's wounds, his fingers tracing the scars of a life lived in violence. "Why me?" Julian asked one night, lying in the massive four-poster bed. Dante was sitting on the edge, keeping watch, unable to sleep. "I told you." "The sample was a mistake," Dante said, looking at the moonlight on the floor. "No," Julian said, sitting up. "Why did you come for me? You could have waited until the birth. You could have taken the baby and paid me off. Why bring me here? Why protect me?" Dante turned. The amber glow of his eyes had softened to warm honey. "Biology is strange. The moment I saw your file, the moment I smelled you in that alleyway, my inner wolf recognized you, not just as a carrier, but as balance." He reached out, his hand hovering over Julian's stomach. Julian took Dante's hand and pressed it against the kicking baby. Dante's breath hitched. A look of pure wonder crossed his face, erasing the hardness of the Mafia Don. "He's strong." Julian smiled. "We found out today. It's a boy." "A boy," Dante repeated. He looked at Julian, his gaze intense. "He will need a father. Not a donor. A father." "He has one," Julian said quietly. "And he needs a mother. Or a second father. Whatever you wish to be," Dante said, his voice rough. "I cannot let you go, Julian. Not anymore. Even if there was no child. I cannot let you go. You have become my sanity." He leaned in, his face inches from Julian's. "I am a monster. I am selfish. I have blood on my hands that will never wash off. But I will rip the world apart to keep you safe. Will you stay? Not as a prisoner, but as my partner. As the only one who can command the alpha." Julian looked at the man before him. He saw the danger, yes. But he also saw the devotion. He saw a man who had been alone in a crowded room his entire life, finally finding his anchor. Julian realized that the safety he craved wasn't in a quiet apartment. It was right here, in the eye of the storm. "I won't be a trophy," Julian whispered. "And I won't be hidden away. Never," Dante swore. "You will stand beside me. You will be the only person I answer to. And no more secrets," Julian added. "My life is an open book to you." Julian closed the distance. He kissed Dante, softly at first, a testing of waters, and then deeper, as Dante groaned and pulled him close, careful of the stomach between them. It tasted of danger and promise. "Then I stay," Julian whispered against Dante's lips. Epilogue: the coronation. 6 months later. The ballroom was filled with the elite of the underworld. The heads of the 5 families were gathered, tension radiating in the air. They were waiting to see if the rumors were true, if the wolf of the East Coast had truly been tamed. The double doors opened. Dante Rossi walked in, looking as lethal as ever in a black tuxedo. But he wasn't alone. On his arm was Julian, dressed in deep midnight velvet, looking regal and sharp. And in Dante's other arm, held with a surprising, terrifying tenderness, was a small bundle wrapped in white silk. Silence fell over the room. Dante walked to the center of the room. He scanned the crowd, his amber eyes daring anyone to speak, to move, to breathe wrong. "This is Lorenzo Rossi," Dante announced, his voice carrying to the rafters. "My heir." He turned to Julian, looking at him with a reverence that shocked the room. "And this is Julian, my consort. His word is my word. Disrespect him, and you disrespect me. And you know the punishment for that." Dante leaned down and kissed Julian's knuckles. It was a public declaration of submission from the most powerful alpha in the city to his omega. Julian squeezed Dante's hand, his chin lifted high. He wasn't the scared archivist in the rain anymore. He was the heart of the beast. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Julian take his rightful place on the throne, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who kidnapped you if he turned out to be your soulmate? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt: masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art, 2 men, BL, Omegaverse, Man 1. Dante Rossi, tall muscular alpha, sharp jawline, amber eyes, slicked back black hair, neck tattoos, wearing expensive black tuxedo, protective expression, holding a baby wrapped in white silk. Man 2. Julian Vane, slender omega, soft features, wearing midnight blue velvet suit, standing confident beside Man 1, hand resting on Man 1's arm. Background is a grand ballroom with crystal chandeliers, blurred crowd of Mafia elites in suits, dramatic lighting spotlighting the couple, gold and black color palette, cinematic composition, intricate details.